Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's Shamila Ramjawan from the Red Corner Show. My guest on the show today is Lee Moodley from South Africa. Lee calls himself a scientist, philosopher, and an artist. He's a yoga teacher. He's a certified functional range assessor, a functional range conditioning mobility specialist, calisthenics, and mobility coach. He's the founder of Kinisi Therapy and currently working on a project called Movement Sanctuary, which we're going to hear all about. And he's also a Reiki Healer. Hello, Lee. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks, Auntie Shams. Thank you for the opportunity to share and the privilege of sharing as well on this show. So yeah, so I think the titles might have been a bit of a interesting one for people. And I feel like filling up, as much of the yoga certifications and the different titles in those spaces, we talk about a lot of lenses that we use. And, so when you kind of put on a cap, there's the finance cap or accounting cap. And sometimes the caps get a little conflicting. So I try to distill them, and I feel the three spaces almost kind of give me an external lens inwards. So basically science, learning how to the maths, biology, the science of how to integrate all of that into your kind of internal working. So the philosophy would be the internal space, how we choose to live, how we process internally. And obviously the artist would be our outward expression of what we choose to share. And I think those three lenses kind of cover a lot of expressions in human, what we choose to integrate and what we choose to look at and observe. And so I just think those titles were kind of interesting, and it kind of was inspired by my teacher, Cameron Shane, and he kind of uses those three lenses to articulate the movement practice, which is a Budokan yoga style, which I teach. And lots of people think it's pretty hard and intense, and they'll go to a crazy vinyasa class in 30 degrees or 40 degrees and then tell me that's okay. But just a little bit of accountability in your body and space seems a little bit intense. And that's kind of what Movement Sanctuary is going to be about. It's just a little bit of reflection in terms of those spaces. And yeah, we just use those lenses in terms of, and that's why I kind of picked those titles, because as we go along, we can accumulate and get all of these different caps, but it's also nice to kind of make it simple rather than cluttered. So that's kind of why after studying 8 or 9 styles of yoga, I'm like, okay, I don't know which one is yoga anymore.
So it sounds so interesting, but it sounds complicated at the same time. So how do you distinguish between all of this?
I think that's probably the interesting bits. I think that's why I kind of created Movement Sanctuary, was a space for me to house all my interests. So one of the areas that I haven't been able to share of a lot of my practices, as it's doesn't resonate in the yoga community, because they feel like it's moving into gym or performance training. Yet it's mindfulness, but a little bit asking a little bit more intensity in terms of the body requirements or accountability into those spaces. And vice versa. So if you go into the gym environment, sometimes it can be very alienating as a woman, because it becomes more objective space versus a space for working. So that performance space is never accessed in the yogic space, because it's always like, oh, I feel light, feel easy. And that's something we never really experience in yogic practice, because it's all about ourselves. Whereas my Budokan practice allowed me to understand conflict. So part of their curriculum, so they do yoga, mobility, calisthenics, and then they do 2 fighting styles, which is stand-up fighting and jiu-jitsu for ground combat. And all of those form the elements of the practice. And one of the unspoken pillars, I feel, is the mind science, which is the way we kind of have our internal dialogue with the world. And this is how we try and practice, is trying to be scientific in our process. So when we analyze and take information, so the types of lenses you might be have a more biological lens, or a more empathetic lens, or a more analytical lens. And sometimes these approaches are the way you choose to operate. Now, and that's fine when you're working and doing stuff by yourself. And, that's great for the yogic work. However, we operate in a busy lifestyle, constantly stimulated with, phone calls, meetings, memes, and we're getting all this information, but we're not able to integrate it or understand it because we haven't embodied it in a way. And that's probably why it's taken me so long to even choose to share because I haven't been sure of how to share it and what's the correct, it's like if I look back 7 years when I started my yoga journey and look now, I still have the same experience and feelings in my body that I had 7 years ago, yet the understanding and dynamics is a lot more different. Like I'm sharing exactly what was feeling years ago, but now I have a much better understanding of articulating it through a scientific, esoteric. So sometimes you want to be analytical, and then there's sometimes where you just want to allow the body to feel and nurture itself because it is intelligent by design. It's meant to survive. And I think our world is very intense in that way. So, and we're always overstimulating the nervous system, so it never actually feels at rest. And this is also
I think, sorry, I just want to stop you there. I think it's important, especially at a time like this. We're all facing COVID and we're going through all the stress and trauma and anxiety, and we have to bring in that mindfulness. But how did this actually impact on what you do as a yoga teacher?
So at first, it feels like there's a lot of resistance to this level or this style of thinking, if you want to call it that. Because it's very scientific I try to keep it very scientific because that's really our common language between all of us, right? If we don't keep it scientific and it becomes about opinions and beliefs, it becomes hard to distill. And that's not to say opinions and beliefs don't matter in all of these things. Opinions and beliefs are our feelings, our way we want to choose these things, right? And that's where I want the space to almost be neutral. So if you hear what we're talking about, we're not even talking about yoga spaces, and we're not even talking about religious but the context fits in all these spaces, right? We're trying to find a place where we can all communicate in a way or a medium that allows us to be accountable for our own feelings and actions, and also be able to negotiate that space with other people. And this may seem very complicated, but it's pretty easy. You put a square box and you tell two people, fight to the death, and we can have war games. We have UFC in that way. But it also can be a little bit more playful in the way we choose to interact with each other. So it doesn't have to be to the death. It could be to points or to just engage and see how we are interacting with our environment. So sometimes what I find a lot of people entering yoga class is they're always under this achievement style, or we have to gain something from the practice. Whereas the majority of the people need a nervous system reset to slow it down because they're overstimulated. Yet they'll go and work really intensely and then go and do a crazy workout, which doesn't actually restore the body. So it's placing even more strain on the on the parasympathetic system, which is what governs your digestion, all the basic needs of the body. So learning how to turn that is huge.
Sorry, do you think they actually want to see a physical difference more than an internal emotional difference?
Well, they're both entwined, right? Most people are like, oh my gosh, your body's great, you're training. And I'm like, I'm obviously lifting. I'm not trying to get a good looking body. I'm trying to get a very highly functional body because essentially I'm building the space. We broke a tennis court by hand, so myself and the caretaker, with a sledgehammer and a pickaxe. Right? The idea is, yes, we can get people to do these things, but we also want to invest energy and time. And by going through this process, we're also showing the capacity that we've built into our bodies, right? Now, we want to have that accessible all the time, not when we feel like, oh, we need to warm up. And this is more a philosophy to Darwin's animal survival of the fittest, because human nature, we need to kind of be pushing our things to get the best capacity out of us. So we need to learn how to stress and strain in a mindful way for us to train mentally, physically, emotionally. And it's very difficult when we don't have spaces supporting that. So the idea is obviously to have a food space to support people who are doing this work, so that if you do feel like you're going to fall one day on eating healthy, or think there's a space to help you accommodate this. You know, we're trying to supplement a community space and almost bring back the community space that allows a bit of this. So it will take a bit of time, because I think the hardest one is year of accountability in a space. So if I say I want to pitch up, you pitch up, right? The way you communicate, you start to get mind, and the process is free. If I talk to you and it's not interesting, or you're not, it's like you're going into a place that's not here or present in this space, or you start to question, you start to kind of go. So you, just a quick question: what's your? Do you think with a dialogue, or do you think with imagery or sounds or visual stimuli?
Sure. I would say it's a combination.
Yes, but you generally have a dialogue. So if you had to, someone told you something that adverse news, you'd process it with a word like, "Oh my gosh," or how, like.
Yes, yes. That would be your, right? That would be your instant response.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's naturally how we think about our response. But there's also a so when we ask people to observe, right? There's a response. You're taking in that information, which is one stimulus, and then there's also the stimulus of understanding and processing. So this can happen instantaneously, but our bodies are also designed to react to keep us safe. So if we're not understanding when we're moving into that trauma state, which is like the fight or flight survival, or under comfort. So when you're starting to think and drift off into a thought space, you're like, I'm moving away from the Zen space of being here, because now I'm starting to think about future and past events, right? Like a fear, or so if I ask you for a scary moment, you can go into that. I don't even have to tell you, describe a scary moment. Your brain already has processed that emotion and feeling without having a need to create a specific moment for you to kind of go to. And this is like what we're trying to hit. So it's very easy. The question is how many times you catch yourself doing that, right? And that's the accountability. It's like when we're saying things like, "Oh, I want to see you," but we're doing it frivolously to make us feel safe in that moment and not actually committing. We're not kind of signaling correctly in the spaces that we want to create. And this is also part of like the types of, we're not trying to tell people how to do or live. You pick those living, right? You pick the choices or the caps and the lenses you wish to live by. But here is a space that if you're communicating, those are the lenses you want to be stronger. We want to help you hold it accountable. We're not trying to pick and prod you. We want to have that support. So if you're doing things that aren't resonating with what you're showing or want to be, then there's a place where people, that these people have your best interest, because they want you to be the best of whatever you choose to be, right? Regardless of your belief or where you come from or background, because these are not, our interactions aren't governed by that, right?
So my question to you is, what projects have you packaged for the Sanctuary Movement?
So we're going to start off with a mindfulness space. So the idea is I'm starting an introductory workshop to try and break the, what do you call it? The idea of yogic practice or mindfulness practice. So I wanted to bring it down to a simplest understanding of being mindful. So the different ways of having a mindfulness practice. So I'm having an introductory series which introduces mindfulness, and then we'll use yoga as a kind of asana medium, but obviously there's yogic principles that would fall into the mindfulness space. There'll be also yogic principles in the restoration space. So we'll use different styles of yoga practices across those mediums. And then, so once we understand the kind of 5 shapes that I think most yogis need to understand and know if they have the capacity before even going into a traditional yoga class, just because our general bodies aren't developed in the way that the yoga practice was designed 100 years ago. So we've got to adjust our practice with more restorative and scientific understanding of tissue rehabilitation, which is what I wanted to So allowing us to be more scientific about our restoration process, how to heal, and using the body as a medium to kind of move into the more emotional and mental health spaces.
Mainly
So that's
just to condition your body, condition the body.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay,
you're using
awesome.
the body. So there's a lot of different philosophies on this. Some people say you need to still the mind to work the body. Some people say you need to still the body to work the mind, right? And it's like we're all arguing about which side we want to kind of practice when everyone needs to figure out which, because it's not one or the other, it's somewhere in between.
It reminds
Right?
me of COVID because right now we don't know how COVID's being spread.
Right? Yeah, well, I don't know. This is my belief. The whole world and this is just my belief. So if anyone doesn't want to agree with it, disagree with it, we can always have a cup of coffee, because this is how we work through these ideas. And it's not to say these beliefs don't exist. So this is just my share of it. From a scientific perspective, we have almost 9 billion people affected by this crisis. There's a large majority of scientists that are trying to share different things. Now, the question is how clearly and how articulately are we sharing our information with each other, right? Is it someone, there's only a certain particular way that this virus operates. It might be multiple, say, triggers or causes or symptoms, but the way it impacts the body should obviously be understood by a large variety. And if we're sharing all these ideas, rather than fighting on opinions, we're coming to a middle ground of what all our beliefs are. And science is really not a science. It's actually our way of, we've chosen to believe in this way of, we say, okay, because 1 + 1 doesn't necessarily equal 2 unless we all believe that, right? So this is also a construct that we've created to interact with our environment. And we've got to also understand that they're constructs. We can change them at any point in time as we develop better understanding. And this is where we need to be able to clearly communicate effectively. So I'm not sure how different governments are approaching this. All of this, I know that I can only control the space that I occupy. And
yes, I think we all can. Our hands are tied when it comes to that, because we are not qualified to do that. And we cannot spread any news that we're not sure of anyway.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know how this virus operates. I kind of have a better understanding of my own immune system when I feel sick, when I should feel like I need to. So this is where we could also come into responsibility of, so the idea of, yes, there's a social responsibility. Yes, we all feel the frustration and anger because, and this is the trauma state I talked about, right? A lot of people are not really frustrated or angry because it's really a question of survival. And this is what I want to kind of shift the understanding of, is when I moved into Movement Sanctuary, I'd already started the garden process as part of my idea of showing food to plate. So people start to connect a lot more to the natural process of an organic process rather than a more industrial or manufactured process of immediate, because nature has its flows and we got to feel that and understand that, just like our biology also kind of moves the same way the kind of moon affects tides. Our body is affected by kind of lunar shifts in that way. So, these esoteric things that use horoscopes and all of those things used to be so like, oh my gosh, airy fairy. But now as you start to like bring in a lot more scientific evidence and understanding, there's no difference between those planes. The question is, are we going more feeling based? Or we're going more signal? And it's really, if we can interact by ourselves independently, doing good things, we don't have to change in any way or do new things. We're just trying to contribute better in our ways that we feel comfortable. Right?
Absolutely. And tell me, Lee, with the Movement Sanctuary, are you doing this all by yourself or you collaborated with somebody?
So I did this by myself. I've been lucky enough to have my mom and dad assist me through this process. Just because I don't think anyone would also have these type of beliefs if they didn't have the safety and sanctuary space that was provided by my family. Now, the reason I say this is because when we're fighting to earn a living versus fighting for survival, there's two different processes. right? Being able to survive, like grow food, collect basic human function, we're deemed maybe to say 100,000 years ago when we just shifted into our agricultural age. You know, that's kind of what was deemed necessary to survive in the kingdom. Now, not so much. The ability to work, yet the value of our human exchange is skewed. If you look at the price of labor in South Africa versus the price of labor in Europe versus the cost of goods, like these are all borders and constructs of value, yet we're not understanding that, you know, I don't know if you've heard of the Big Mac Index.
No, I haven't.
It's an economic way of trying to value the price of goods. So it's an economic way of valuing prices of goods across different countries. So because we're so globalized at this point, which is quite scary, that we have a cost of Big Mac in almost every country.
Oh yes, of course I did. Of course I did. Sorry, I just didn't hear it properly. Of course, yes.
Yes. So the idea that we have different values of food, something that's more a necessity at the thing, yet we're kind of costing the survival process versus allowing people to almost be able to learn the organic nature, because that was the skill of humanity, right? And this is also is a lot more empowering for people, because this is basically you sow what you reap. It's also in a way capitalism, but it's allowing capitalism to exist in a, you know, like your self-reward is, you know, your reward is kind of aggregated to your effort that you place within this. But as we also have to kind of, so this is just something that I'm exploring. I'm also trying to figure it out, because this is my feelings of it, and I don't know if I've got the right answer or not. And the only way to do these things is to lead by example and share from it. And this is why I want people to see and explore it, because we can come up with different ideas. And this project is obviously not for next year or anything. This is a 5 to 10 year project, because we're creating a forest, we're getting a sustainable garden, we're going to be taking everything off the grid. Yeah, so we're also creating meditation pods for people to come in so that they can self-practice, because you can learn the material, but the practice is an internal process. You're not going to get that in a group class. You can learn all those tools in a way that interacts comfortably with your body. So we'll have aerial hammocks. There's going to be jiu-jitsu mats for people to explore self-defense, because this isn't about empowering. So one of the largest problems in South Africa is we have the safety issue. So like getting a comfortable space so that girls can actually feel comfortable whilst training how to push someone off them, because it's about timing. And you're not going to know that in a stressed out, traumatized state if this is going to happen, if, you know, God forbid, but you at least know you're empowered to take the responsibility in those spaces and know when to take the chance, rather than just being fearing for your life.
But why would it take so long, Lee?
Because that's the sad reality. But that's if I was a woman. But to open.
I think the signal is quite bad here. Why would it take you so long? Is it the research that you have to put into it?
Well, to open.
Yes, but you said 5 to 10 years. That's a long time.
No, that's my projection. No, that's some of the ideas we have projected. So we're going to look, we're waiting for a system, we're waiting for us to get our permission to open officially as a studio so we can run daily. I'm currently we're just hosting, I'm just doing it as workshops to start introducing people to the space slowly.
Okay.
And that's why the idea is also to get the right base, because this might not be for everyone. No, you know, accountability is not something I'm forcing anyone to do. Right?
So how would you attract people to this this entire sanctuary movement, creating that space?
I'm not trying to attract anyone, right? I'm building my house essentially, and this is what I believe a house should encompass. And these are all my interests I'm sharing in it. And part of it is trying as I open up and the space evolves, I'm technically relinquishing my rights to the space.
Okay.
Right? And my home is getting smaller and smaller. And this is the way I'm thinking that we all kind of learn to liberate us from the struggle of trying to sustain. Because if we start to take responsibility for our spaces, create the sustainability individually, we can start to maybe gain a little bit of excess that we can share with the people outside. For instance, trying to have a veggie garden on the pavement is our next goal. Once we start to have all of the kind of veggies sorted, so it's still a learning curve as well. So there's a whole year to 2 years process that we're gonna have to learn from scaping the gardens to getting the different colors inside. You know, so the idea is to have the full spectrum of the rainbow in flowers in the garden. But that's also going to be due to seasons. So learning how to listen to nature and seeing the flowers and trying to integrate it in such a way that over 5 to 10 years, we don't have to water it because it becomes almost its own integrated ecosystem. And that we, you know, that's a longer kind of expression or statement for kind of asking why, you know, like if we can survive and kind of sustain ourselves, like, isn't this the way to kind of decentralize because it's not about creating more cities, it's about sustaining people. And we have one of the most beautiful landscapes, we have a lot of nature, and we've got almost urban spaces, and we're just trying to all fit into Joburg. And this is why I picked Bryanston,
I so agree with you.
I want to educate the community here because they have the capital and capacity to do this if they take the responsibility to their own homes. And it's a slow learning curve, but this is the only way I feel like I'm not shoving my idea in someone's, or my beliefs towards someone, but hopefully converting people to believe in a way of just respect for human beings, right? I'm not asking for much, just a way we choose to interact. You know, from a family perspective, from a friend's perspective, from a business perspective, I think this is probably the lowest form of integrity I think we can ask for. You know, we're not asking for much by saying, please be considerate to the next person. You know, like I think these come from all the different spiritual teachings, and I think we all get caught up with words rather than the essence on how we embody those things. And this is, I think, yeah, so I'm not trying to force this on anyone. I don't think this is like, I've chosen this journey, right? This is my kind of high standards that I wish to uphold, and hopefully.
So it's basically your personal achievement and your goals.
Yeah, I don't want to force anyone to this practice, but I'm sure it'll resonate with people because it's going to have an artistic expression because we're going to also convert part of the thing to have photography in the garden. I've run Cat5 cables to allow people to work with their laptop inside the garden, so they can take a meditation pod, a cushion, cup of coffee, and go in and work without being disturbed, but it's still private. It still offers us support, right? We're trying to create that privacy, and it's a luxury, which is sad in SA, but you know, safety is a huge luxury. And essentially, this is what it would take for us to understand how to kind of create more, kind of removing a barrier without kind of creating one. Removing a barrier while still maintaining that kind of space between us.
So who is this going to be open to?
Everyone. So we're going to start, my focus is to start with an older crowd, people who really want to fix their bodies, because a lot of the stuff is, a lot of trainers also believe that the injuries are psychosomatic. So if you think of the brain as an electrical system, and you keep thinking a particular way, anger, or, you know, emotionally sad, or if you go into these loops, you start to kind of create that negative feedback. It's like almost like the surge needs to ground somewhere. And unlike animals, we don't shake it off or let it go. And this is where the Reiki has really helped me understand a lot more of the subtle energy body and allow me to access those spaces, which is a very unique space when you're going in, interacting from a physical and scientific space, because it's very feeling based. I can't rationally explain it or the process, but obviously when clients go through it, they're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I feel grounded, I feel restored, I feel rejuvenated. So I want it to be for everyone, but essentially the older crowd is not going to come here worrying about what name we call it. As long as it feels good, it works for them to understand their body better. It's more a learning experience. I want people that are wanting to learn and inquire about everything, right? We're just being mindful about our bodies in the thing, but the mindfulness translates into the way we make coffee, the way we choose to dress, the way we open our doors, like each piece of our expression, each moment becomes a part of science, a part of philosophy, and a part of art. And that's why I picked those lenses, because it kind of comes, it simplifies that, rather than, because it sounds very daunting. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to try this. It's like
I think it's very interesting. I'm like really intrigued. I'm just listening to all of this and I'm just learning so much, and I'm really going to visit this sanctuary of yours for sure.
What I would recommend is to start off with the intro course, right? The intro course really is there to try and let you figure out what styles of movement you want, right? Do I need to feel less stressed? So we teach you some restorative ideas. Do you need to kind of be more focused? So there's more mindfulness. And sometimes, we talk about mindfulness. Sometimes you have a very energetic body. So you need to maybe burn out some energy before you can kind of ground. Or maybe you need to kind of ground before you can get into the body and kind of go for it, right? And each body is unique, but it's also giving you the correct lens so that you can adapt any class, whether you go into someone else who doesn't understand, because no one's going to drive your vehicle better than you. Not me. I can maybe understand it and give you guidelines, but no one's going to tell you when it's hurting. No one's going to tell you when you're going too far, right? The problem I found is a lot of people don't understand that, right? Because if the goal is to push maybe, or to achieve a higher weight, or more reps, or right, rather than just listen, right? So I don't train in that way, but I can comfortably press into a handstand, right? That's why I started my yoga practice. It stopped halfway through, but now as I just do the daily work, it's there, right? Some days I shouldn't be doing it, and that's when I need to really listen. And that's like, in that moment I'm like, oh, maybe I must make the class, like do a move to inspire the class, and like take it, and then you hurt yourself, right? Then you're out of that Zen state. That's what we're talking about again. Yes. So it's very simple, but it becomes very hard to account for each and every moment. And that's really the practice. And it's not, the only time it's hard is when you're not really being true to yourself, or true to what actually resonates with you, or when something makes you uncomfortable, you have to speak up or try and negotiate the space so that you don't, right? Because if you keep staying uncomfortable, it bottles up and you explode. Or you're the opposite. You're like just all of a sudden snap because you heard it a way you didn't like to hear it. Yet the person was actually on your side and actually on giving you the right idea, but because the tone might have not been the way you liked it or appreciated, you're snapped. Rather than taking the time to not react, breathe, listen to exactly what the person said. And this is hard, because when we deal with family, we're traumatized. It's so sensitive, because they know exactly how to push your buttons. They know exactly what you want to do.
Tell me about it. Different personalities.
Yeah. And that's okay, right? It's just like that's somehow their way of showing love, and we don't understand it. And that's where the way they believe love should be shown. And it's more about explaining and understanding, like, this is what I truly believe and feel. And then I know that, right? So when I do this, I'm like, I'm doing it because I know I have to share this idea, because I feel like it's time for it and it's most necessary. And I was lucky to have 9 months of COVID to literally move in 15 minutes before lockdown was enforced, and have been here since, building and creating. And it started off with small fixing plugs, and now it's just like I've got the confidence and capability because I built the small goals, and now I'm allowed to take bigger bites because I built the capacity. Now, if I stop taking those small bites, I'm going to lose that capacity and can never expect to achieve the same, right? That's something that the older crowd needs to learn, and that's why I like them, because I just need to teach them to tap off. Whereas a younger crowd just wants the newest trend, the latest technology, and the newest Instagram move. And I'm like, sure, you can do those things. Are they functional? Sure. If I go and put my hand behind my leg, I don't open a door like this, right? That's not functional. I'm just overstretching my, and if I'm overstretching these things, you've got to understand why you're doing these movements, right? And that comes down to really reflecting on what's your purpose, what you want, and this is just understanding your requirements of your body. But as you start to add that detail, you can start to add the requirements of your emotional states, the spaces you want to live in, the spaces that you want to create, what do you view as a space. And that's partly what I'm doing here, is trying to show the belief. that I had to imagine this, I had to create the belief. And when people didn't believe, like there's days where Philemon looks at me and is like, what, you want to break a tennis court with a pickaxe? And I'm like, yes, I know. You don't have to do it. You don't have to believe it. But when he sees me there breaking that thing, he knows that I believe in that. When we have to dig in those, like, and sink in like the banana strelitzias to kind of give us additional compost, even though we're just going to cut those trees and kind of get rid of them. We can use them as compost. When we have to dig those things to create our paths, you know, when it starts off and people don't, it's like, they don't have to be the drive for you, right? You've got to say, I want that. No one's going to do anything for you. No one's going to make it easier. It's only you can do these things. And that's part of what we want to develop is grit. And some South Africans have a strong level of grit if you look at us internationally and look at us in the international framework, because we have a great understanding of diverse cultures and great understanding. It just seems like when we're in here in our melting pot, we don't know how to interact with each other. We don't know how to show that compassion. But when we leave, we somehow like we're drawn to each other, and we're amazing and we're resilient and we got that. And I think this is why I wanted to be here rather than anywhere else in the world. And it's like we get a great amount of civil liberties in SA. So,
sure.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Lee, I'm going to stop you there. We're running out of time. But is this something that you're going to implement into the education system? Because I think there's so much of value in what you're just saying.
I've tried, but I've also, remember, to change your own teachers' beliefs is very difficult. And this is partly why my school's 100, like maybe less than a K or 2 Ks away. And the idea of teaching it to older generation allows me to bring in a younger generation because they believe it's valuable to their kids, right? It's not, and if they believe it's valuable, we also get a space of community where we get to observe parents' habits and children's habits together and separately. So you can have a class for children, a class for mom, and you can assess, like, if mom's not communicating well to the child. You know, it's sometimes when you're explaining something, it's like sometimes you're being too aggressive and the kid's going into trauma state. So and it's not him not understanding and being a bad reflection of you, which is your whole thing to deal with. You know, like, and that's an exchange. Like, I think it's a huge thing for parents to let go of their children and say, okay, you know, like, I can't control you.
You're on your own. Just say you're on your own for now.
Well, it's less about on your own and saying, like, I understand you and get you and know exactly what makes you happy. And if you're doing all of those things, how are you a sad parent, right? They might not they might not have taken your teachings in the way you want to share it, but they definitely might have understood, and they listen to your actions more. And that's why I want our actions to speak a lot more, because that's taken a lot of time to process, to do, because we're being very diligent and precise in the way we try to get. And it's not to say we're going to have days where we're perfect. There's going to be days where we're like, oh my gosh, I dropped the ball. It's like, I don't know why. Like, my left's on this side, my right's on that side.
We're human. We're allowed to...
Right? And that's part of the thing, is how, like, when we have those explosions, don't just slide them under the carpet. It's like, hey guys, like, this is where it came from for me. This is what it felt like. This is why I got angry, right? We're just showing out each other how we accounted towards that situation. Because if we can distill that, it really shows, like, oh, it is actually, you did something like this, which reminded me of my childhood memory. I didn't even realize that, but that's how memory works. It's not like, okay, you learned grade 8 science and it's packed in grade 8 science. And it's like, no, it's actually packed with the trauma of all the biology class because you had to deal with dissect the frog. And now you don't know.
Oh gosh, I'm an example of that. I ran out of the class.
So there might be information there that you're keeping hidden away because you're too scared to access because of that trauma, that feeling or that sensation. And that's what we want to be able to distill, and we can't distill it if everyone's pointing fingers, right?
Yes.
If we're all accounting for ourselves and we're having a discussion about our beliefs and trying to find the middle ground, that's the time. And this is why I wouldn't like to get into politics, because there's too many talks about directions or sides and not enough discussions on what's the middle piece that helps everyone. right? And it's not to say the varying sides aren't available or aren't valid. We have to accommodate all of those things. And we're not trying to accommodate, we're trying to like play tug of war with almost a budget of what we should just be trying to get shared to everyone, rather than trying to see, you know, and that's from an economic perspective. And this is why this home is trying to become sustainable for 40 people, because if we can sustain 40 people on 4,000 square meters, we've got more than enough land in South Africa to figure out how to do these things or create these hubs.
Lee, when will we be able to see Movement Sanctuary?
Well, you're welcome to come and visit anytime, Auntie. We can have coffee and discuss more. But I have a workshop starting to, so I've started opening up in Feb. So the Feb, every Saturday I have workshops. So it's one workshop. If we do get more people, we'll open up a Sunday workshop. It's really limited to 10 people. The idea is I want people to learn rather than trying to fill up spaces, because this is an educational process. And it also gives us time to address a lot of individual kind of understanding, because one shape can mean 1,000 different things to each person. And we got to try and get all those nuances for you. So, and that's also why we use 5 shapes across all 4 workshops, so that you have a common shape to assess the different palettes that we'll be teaching, the different type of lenses, so that you know, okay, I'm using mindfulness now, I'm using restoration now, I'm using strength training now, I'm playing now. And they all might look the same, but they all feel texturally different. So that's one of the workshops. Then I have a 3-hour somatic movement, and it's basically what I deem as the modern jaw. So it's a space for you to move and explore your body. I have a friend who is a producer. He goes and designs music for these scapes, and we play it live, where we get to manipulate the time, the sounds, textures, and we also get to allow you to move through your body and just allow your subconscious to move. So it's a Friday night experience. That's on the 26th, and it's a whole, and we're lucky because I don't get to do this often with him as a producer. So it's like once every 2 years, and before he goes to the Maldives, I want to kind of use this as also another introduction to this space, because this is something that we're making these things up, but it's a way of allowing people a space to process the trauma without talking about it, but also allowing it to come to the surface of the psyche, so that you can address what's really driving or nagging at that. And then the final one would be, I also do privates, and once we open, which will probably be March, hopefully March, if council and everything and Corona says yes, but essentially we're still doing our work in the garden, and we'll always have stuff to do on the space. So whether we're open or not open, we're like working towards our end goal, it's 5 to 10 years. And so hopefully June, I think we're opening, but we will be hosting very different types of workshops. So one would be a self-defense towards the end of March, as we learn how to get the right dialogue and curriculum and how to train, just to make people feel more playful rather than just too serious about it. So getting people to really feel what it is to have an overgrown, heavy man on top of you, but also knowing that this person's here to teach you and is compassionate enough that they're not trying to strangle you, and showing you how, because you need that experience, right?
Yes.
There's nothing going to teach you how to fight, but apart from a fight. You can do all the kind of prep and training until you get hit in the face. You don't know what it feels like. And that's part of what Budokan is there. It's just trying to push those boundaries so that you're making clear and conscious decisions. And I think a quote from my teacher, which is a nice way, is, I'd rather be a warrior tending to my garden than a gardener at war. So rather prepare for all these things and prepare yourself to be highly skillful in anything and everything you do. And you don't need to have it, right? The self-defense and everything, you don't need to go and kill someone or break someone down. You don't need to go through that extremes to learn all of these things. So we're trying to also create a compassionate space for people to learn how to fight, to engage, to play with this. And it's, the intensity is dance or fight. And
I love it. I think, Lee, we're going to leave it at that because we're running out of time. But how can one get hold of you?
Yeah, I'll send you the page. I'll send you the details and all the links. Because I'm starting to feel more comfortable to share. And thank you for letting me share on this. It's been a pleasure. These are all my passions in a way, in one little home, I guess.
I can hear it. I can hear it. It's coming from the heart, and you speak so proudly about it. I can see that you put a lot into it as well. Thank you, Lee, for coming on board and chatting to us. And I'm sure you're going to inspire a lot of people. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to get in touch with you because they want to get involved and see exactly what this is all about as well.
And I'm also going to have a lot of people run away. So it's okay.
And I'm definitely coming by. The kids and I, we're going to come by and visit. And I think it's about time we need to visit you. So so definitely we will come by and see this whole creation and how it works.
Yeah, I'll walk you through the garden. I'll walk you through the veggies. You can meet Shadow, which is also one of the dogs we kind of part of the studio. So
lovely.
Shadow. So we are trying to integrate those spaces. So it's more the long-term visions of the community space center.
Lovely. And I'm sure I can have my next photo shoot there.
For sure. That's exactly what we're designing it for. It's for photo shoots. So,
yes.
Allowing people, there's going to be, you can stream from you can move your red corner into the garden for one day if you'd like.
Lovely. I'd love to do that. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you. And wish you all the best, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Andy Shams. Have a great evening. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, and to you too, and to everyone watching. I hope you have a wonderful evening as well, and I hope Lee Moodley inspired you. I will share his links to his page and his contact details so that you can be in touch with him. Thank you for watching. Bye.